This just in. Badminton and ping pong are not contact sports. Hockey is. And that's why I'm so delighted to be able to stand here before you and share with you that after 11 years in the NHL, the first 9 of which, by the way, were played without a helmet, after 125 stitches in my face, 12 broken bones, and 13 surgeries, I'm able to share with you, these are all my teeth. I have no idea how that happened. It tells me one thing: my timing was good as a hockey player. And I'm here to admit that my timing was better when I was on the ice than it was when I retired. When I retired, I acquired the rights for a Canadian restaurant franchise called Grandma Lee's Bakery and Deli. I acquired the rights for Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. And I put all of my money into this venture, moved back to Atlanta from Calgary, Alberta, where I'd retired. Not only put all my money into this venture, but I put a lot of other people's money in as well. By the way, all of my money represented what I was able to save after a salary that peaked out at $137,000. Today, anybody have any idea what the average salary is in the NHL? $2.8 million. It's safe to say I missed that window by just a couple of dollars. It didn't take me long to realize once I opened up my pilot store in Atlanta that I was in trouble, and I knew I was going to fail for the first time in my life. And there were days when I would get up at 5:30 in the morning and get into the shower and I would just break down. I wasn't even thinking of anything. I would start to cry and I would walk right out of the shower soaking wet, forget about the towel rack. I'd go right back into the bedroom and I would cover up soaking wet, and it was so beautifully dark under the covers and I could fall asleep like that. And after a few of those bouts, I ended up closing the door to my pilot store. I filed corporate bankruptcy. I filed personal bankruptcy. I was scared. I was broke. I was depressed. I had no job, no career, no training, and I had no college or university degree. And it was at this point that I thought, this would be a pretty good time to figure out how this success thing in life really works. So I started studying successful organizations and getting as close to them as I could. And it didn't take me long to understand that there was a common denominator that they all shared. Every successful organization had an abundance of people that I began calling everyday leaders. Just out of curiosity, how many people here today are in positions of leadership? Nice, close to 50%. You know what I usually get if I have a corporate audience? I get 10 to 15%. Why? Because people identify leadership with their job titles. And here's the truth. It's not about the job title. Most of leadership is about influence. It's about our abilities to influence other people's moods and their attitudes and their behaviors and their contributions, how hard they're willing to work, how long they're willing to work. We all sit in this powerful position of influence 24/7, 365, regardless of our job titles. Thus, the title of my autobiography, Everyday Leadership. I feel pretty strongly about it. My wife and I actually, when I was writing the book, we decided to do something that made writing the book meaningful. We put a charity fund together, and part of the proceeds from my speaking and the book sales goes to this charity fund. We have 4 kids, 4 wonderful kids. I remarried, and we have 4 wonderful kids, a boy and 3 girls. Our oldest daughter is Reagan, and she has Down syndrome. Our second oldest daughter is Krista, and she has multiple sclerosis. And part of the proceeds from our charity fund go to organizations, especially those that in turn help people with Down syndrome and MS. Everyday leaders make choices. I want to speak about a couple of them, but these choices help them earn the 2 things that we have to earn to be successful in any walk of life. We have to earn people's trust, and we have to earn people's respect. These choices also help everyday leaders forge these strong, long-lasting relationships in our personal lives and our professional lives. And in group settings, in team settings, everyday leaders help create a culture in which employee engagement somehow starts to grow organically. And we can see our teammates and our employees starting to take ownership of their work. So I'll speak about 2 choices that everyday leaders make. The first choice has to do with their energy. And not the quantity of their energy, but the quality of their energy. I remember watching Jack Welch when he retired after 20 years as a CEO of General Electric. I watched him being interviewed, and he was asked, Jack, what's the most important quality a leader has to have? And he answered very quickly. He said, it's energy. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good point. But I realized there are different types of energy. One type of energy is very positive, it's very constructive. And one is very negative, and it's very destructive. I call people that have and choose to have positive energy, I call them energy sources. Energy sources are people that others can plug into. You know those days when you're just having a day from hell and you feel like smiling? When you're in the company of an energy source, you just feel better. They never complain about anything. They never seem sick or tired. They are sick and tired. They just don't complain about it. They're the first ones to volunteer to help. And they have this way of seeing opportunity and hope in everything that's around them. And when you're in their company, you can't even fathom that failure is an option. And energy sources have a way of leaving every person and every situation that they find better off when they leave than they were when they found them. Now, the opposite of an energy source is an energy vampire. And we all know an energy vampire, but don't whisper to one another. Somebody will think you're talking about them. Energy vampires suck the life out of every situation they go into. It's always something. They complain about everything. Do you think one day they could offer a solution? It's not in their DNA. By the way, if you want to turn an energy vampire into a statue, it's very easy. Ask them to volunteer. They will not move. They somehow see failure in everything that they go into, and they leave every person in every situation worse than they found them. Just out of curiosity, how many people would rather work beside an energy source than an energy vampire? Oh, unanimous. Good. How many people would rather be dating or married to an energy vampire than an energy source? No take. Oh, you've tried that. It didn't go so good, did it? I actually had an audience a few months ago, and I asked that question, and this very elderly gentleman put up his hand, and I kind of went on with the presentation. I thought, what am I going to do with this man? He wouldn't put his hand down. So at one point, I had to address this. I said, I'm sorry, sir. I'm not sure you understood the question. And he said, oh, I understood the question. I'd settle for a relationship with anybody. I felt so bad for the man. Oh, my gosh. I think every human has a switch, that flipping point, that snapping point, where we go from energy source to energy vampire. Most of the time, when we're successful, our switch, I see the switch on my body, but it's really probably up here. We keep it locked into the energy source side, but it can be flipped into the energy vampire mode. And here's the truth. We control that switch outright, 100% of the time. And when people's switches get flipped, it's usually as a result of their misunderstanding of the 90-10 principle. The 90-10 principle goes like this. 10% of our lives are decided by things that happen to us. 90% of our lives are determined by how we react and respond to the 10%. So what does this mean? It means that we have no control over the 10%. We can't control the economy or the weather or the government or somebody cutting us off on the highway on our way to work, but we have complete control over the 90%. And it's so vital that we concentrate and focus on keeping that switch locked into the energy source side. Why? Because when we don't even know it, we're being observed and we're being evaluated. We're all carrying a flag. Up there is not only the association name, the company name, but your name is up there on the flag. And by our peers, our superiors, our clients, our customers, we are constantly being watched and constantly being evaluated. And I think many of us lose sight, and I do at times, lose sight of the power that we actually possess and the impact we can have on other people. A lady named Linda didn't understand the impact that she had on other people. Linda's my sister-in-law, and she lives in Columbus, Georgia, where my wife is from. And a few years ago, we were there visiting, and I was getting caught up. We don't see them very often. We don't get back there too often. I said, Linda, what are you doing these days? She said, well, I run the Miss Georgia pageant office. I said, well, what's that? Well, the winner of Miss Georgia goes to the Miss America pageant. And she said, it's just a little cubicle in a building in Columbus with a little PC and a fax machine and a copier and a phone. And she told me the story about being on the phone one day with the area director, a man named Parks Rice. And as she spoke to Parks, he said, Linda, you don't sound like yourself. What's the matter? She said, no, everything's okay. He said, no, really, something's bothering you. You can tell me. She said, no, everything's okay. He hung up, and 5 minutes later, the state director, a man named Mansfield Bias, I believe he's still in that position, he called Linda and he said, Linda, you don't sound like yourself. Something's wrong. She said, I'm fine. He said, please tell me. She said, okay, I'll tell you. She said, I take such pride in getting my work done every day, but I can't. The phone rings off the hook. He started to laugh. He said, Linda, don't you know why the phone rings off the hook every day? We used to get 7 calls a week. You don't know why we get 15 a day? She said, I have no idea. He said, well, I do. People feel fantastic after they've spoken to you. He said, I know so many people that when they're having a bad day, they pick up the phone and they call you. Think of what she had done. She was a clearinghouse for positive energy, and she was changing other people's moods, attitudes, and behaviors simply because of the energy level that she had and the quality of the energy, and she was doing it over the phone. Many of these people had never even met her. The choice of the everyday leader has to be everyday, constructive, positive energy source, and not destructive energy vampire. To keep in mind, equal powers. Equal powers. The second choice that everyday leaders make is they choose to pull people as opposed to pushing people. Pushing people is nothing more than managing and directing, telling people where to go, what to do when they get there, how much they're going to get paid, and what time they're allowed to leave. In an extreme sense, it could be raising your voice with somebody, use of sarcasm, could be punishing somebody just because you have a position of authority. Pulling people is different. Pulling people is motivating people to the point of inspiring people. And I've had people tell me, who has time to inspire? We're too busy to bother taking the time to inspire. I said, wait, if I can show you a way that only takes a few seconds, will you try it? They usually say yes. Dwight Eisenhower was the 34th president of the United States and a 5-star general, and he used to use a very simple but graphic example of the difference between pulling people and pushing people. He'd take a piece of string about this long and he'd put it on a table and he'd say, watch, when I pull this, it will follow me wherever I go. When I push it, it will go nowhere at all. He said, it's just that way when you're talking about leading people. So how do you pull people? There are multiple ways. The easiest way, help them feel vital to the outcome. Don't we all want that? I don't think there's one person sitting in this room that doesn't want to feel that his or her contribution is not vital to the outcome. I love the show Undercover Boss. I don't know if any of you, most of you probably seen Undercover Boss, where the high-level executive, usually a president or a CEO, goes undercover, with makeup and wig and stuff like that, but he goes into his company as an entry-level employee, and they want to find out what they're doing wrong or what they can improve on. Every show has a recurring theme, and the recurring theme is this. There's somebody that speaks to this undercover boss and says, nobody really appreciates what we do. Nobody even knows what we do. One lady in Minnesota that worked in a warehouse, she got tears in her eyes. She said, they even took our summer family picnic away from us. That meant so much to her. And there was one woman that worked on a conveyor line in a shipping warehouse, and there was a product, all kinds of different product, and it came fast, and there were boxes everywhere, and she was amazing. And at one point, it was time for the new employee to give it a shot, and he was such a klutz. He dropped things all over the place. They had to shut down the whole shipping operation because he was such a disaster. Later in that day, they were having lunch together, and he said, hey, listen, you're really good at this. Is there a bonus if you do really well at what you're doing? And she said, yeah, you can make up to $200 a month. And he said, do you ever get that $200 bonus? She said, I get it every month. And he said, well, I guess you'd probably recommend that other people come and work here, right? And she said, no, I wouldn't. And his face dropped. And he said, why? She said, because I don't think anybody really, truly appreciates what we go through and what we do at our jobs. I learned the power of feeling vital to the outcome when we made our first run to the Stanley Cup. We faced the Boston Bruins. I was playing for the Broad Street Bullies, the Philadelphia Flyers, and we had a problem. Besides the fact that Boston had Phil Esposito and Bobby Orr and Johnny Busick and Wayne Cashman and a roster that long of Hall of Famers, we needed to win a game in Boston because we did not have home ice advantage. Here was the problem. We hadn't won in Boston in 7 years, 31 games. And game one was so exciting, and we were tied going into the last minute, and dramatically, Bobby Orr scored to beat us in game one. We were so close to getting it to overtime. Game two was even more dramatic. We were trailing going into the last minute. We tied it up, and we won the game in the first overtime period. I didn't play in either of those games. I was in a cast from my groin to my ankle. I had a partially torn medial collateral ligament in my left knee that I'd hurt in the New York Rangers series. And as I watched my teammates play, I said, I got to see if I can play. I was supposed to be in the cast for another 3 weeks and then rehab for at least a week. So I was a month out. Went right to the doctor's office and demanded that he cut the cast off. And he said, you're crazy. I said, cut off my cast. I want to try this. He said, this is on you. I said, okay. He cut the cast off. I jumped off his table and went, oh, 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 oh. I can still remember what that pain felt like. It shot right up through the top of my head. It was so severe. I actually went and tried to skate that day. Mistake. We played game three. We won game three. I tried to skate on the off day. It didn't happen. I could not skate. It was so painful. And our trainer said, look, for game four, don't even bother trying to skate. Just come on in, get into the whirlpool, and try to get some flexion back in your leg. I couldn't even bend it to 90 degrees. So I came to game four, and I'm sitting in the whirlpool, and I'm trying to get some flexibility back in my leg, and our captain, the great Bobby Clark, one of the great leaders, he was only 24 years old. I was 23, but he sat down beside the whirlpool, and he said, how is it? I said, it's not very good. He said, I need to tell you something. I said, yeah, fire away. He said, I don't think we can win the Stanley Cup without you. I went, what? He said, I don't think we can win the Stanley Cup without you. He said, look, the guys that are called up from the minors, and we had 3 other injuries that were more severe than mine, he said, they can't do what you can do. He said, I don't want you to do anything to jeopardize your career or your leg or your knee. Even if you could just come back and kill penalties, you must know this. We are really ready to have you back when you're ready to come back. And he walked out. And my wheels started to turn. I thought, could I really do this? People have said, boy, that's peer pressure. I didn't feel peer pressure. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't say anything negative. He made me feel important. If you want somebody to do important work, just convince them that their work is important. I actually got out of the whirlpool, got up on a table and dried off, and I said to our trainer, Frank Lewis, I said, Frank, shave my leg and tape me up. I'm going to try the warm-up. He said, you're nuts. I said, I'm going to try it. I hobbled down onto the ice, and I just had this feeling that I really looked silly out there because I felt I was noticeably hobbling. And I thought I was like a man skating around with 2 neon signs on his body. One on my back that said one-legged man, and one that was round that had arrows pulsating on and off right here, going with a sign that said, hit him here, hit him here, hit him here. I made it through the warm-up, and when I came up the tunnel to our locker room, Frank Lewis was standing there and said, well, can you play? And my brain immediately screamed at him, no. And my lips went, yeah. And I played game 4, and I got through it, and we killed penalties. We won game 4. We went back to Boston. We got killed 5-1 in game 5. We could have won the Stanley Cup. I got our only goal, so things were coming along. We went back, and we won game 6, 1-0. And as recently as 2 weeks ago at a big alumni event, I had 2 former teammates tell me that they still think I was the best player on the ice in game 6. And please believe me when I tell you that this story has nothing to do with how well I played. I don't believe for a second that I would have even been in game 6 if I had not been made to feel vital to the outcome. We had a coach in Atlanta that tried to make us feel vital to the outcome. His name was Boom Boom Jeffrion. And he was French-speaking, and he never really mastered the English language. I grew up in Quebec. I never really mastered French, so we were kind of tied. in that department, and he had trouble with his singulars and plurals. He'd come into the room, and 18 of us would be sitting there, and he'd say, "Hey, I love you, guy." So we'd be sitting there going, is he talking about me, or is he talking about us? Does he love us all, or does he just love me? We knew we were in trouble when Boom Boom would come into the locker room before a game all hyped up on energy. "Hey, I love you, guy, because you're the clan of flame." Atlanta was Clana, K-L-A-N-N-A. "Hey, I love you, guy, because you're the clan of flame. Hey, tonight we're going to win if we do three things: skate and shoot." And to this day, we're waiting for number 3. He had a problem with simple mathematics. 3 of us would be on one side of the ice in practice, and he'd yell across, "Hey, you three guy, half of you come over here." We just didn't seem to divide properly. 5 years ago, I was on a makeshift stage between the Spectrum, where I won a Stanley Cup in Philadelphia, and the Wells Fargo Center, where the Flyers and the Sixers play today. And it was the first day that the wrecking ball was going to swing into the Spectrum to demolish it. And Dr. J. Julius Irving was one of the speakers that day. And at one point he said, when he retired, a friend of his said to him, "Jay, what are you going to do with your dash?" And Jay said, "I didn't know what the dash was." And I'm sitting behind him going, "I don't know what the dash is either. I know now it's a poem by Linda Ellis." But I'm thinking, is it a dash of hot sauce? Is it a 60-yard sprint? And Dr. J said, "No, it's the hyphen. It's a little horizontal line, but it's the dash that separates the year you were born from the year you died on your tombstone." Everyday leaders never stop trying to fill up their dash with things of meaning in their private lives and in their professional lives. How old are we when we're too old to grow? Never. How old are we when we're too old to change? Never. How old are we when we're too old to become a quality, everyday leader? Never. To each and every one of you here in the audience today, good luck filling up your dash.